We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And so I'm gonna say it this week. I promise that next week I will have the impressions to give of the switching of amplifiers. I'm glad I did not promise for this week because, as I suspected, it did not happen. But I promise for next week, and that means it will happen.
Okay. I just want to let you guys know, I'm going to reach into my envelope if you're a Johnny Carson fan, or look into my crystal ball if you have no idea what I'm talking about, and I will procrastinate the future. I know that's not the right word, so I thought it would be funny to say it that way. I thought it'd be funnier to say it that way. I will procrastinate the future is this. Rob will report extensively on the experience of switching out the amps and talking about that experience.
Okay.
And then in the end, he'll say, yeah, pretty much sounds the same.
Oh, that is entirely what I anticipate. How could I realistically hear a difference in my setup where, I'm probably using 0.3
I mean, you're
watt?
not even changing the power cord. If you were changing the power cord, I mean, then you could hear something for sure.
Yeah. Swap out the electrical outlets. That'll do it.
There you go. The pop-up plus.
That's right. No, I definitely don't anticipate hearing any sort of difference, but the experience of swapping it out and using the app and all that is what I shall report on.
Yes. So apparently some of you have been getting email notifications that I guess we were like undeliverable messages and stuff. That is because the question at avrant.com email address that we tell you all to use gets sent to multiple people. Right. One of those people has, and because of our extreme laziness, we're very much like the government in that once we set something up, we tend not to ever touch it again unless something breaks. So what happened was
something broke,
something broke, and we realized that they must not be using that email address anymore, or it must not be valid anymore. So you guys got a bunch of bounces, but it was still going to all the rest of the people. It's just the one person was bouncing back saying it was undeliverable, but it was only undeliverable to that one person. So don't worry, all your questions got through. We verified everything, so nobody got missed, nobody got left off. So it's fixed in that we deleted them.
Shouldn't be getting bounce back undeliverable email warnings anymore. Apologies to everyone who did, because some people were a little bit worried about it, or some people tried 3 or 4 times, and I got 3 or 4 of their duplicate messages, which was fine because obviously it was on the back end of the server. But yes, hopefully that is updated. Thank you to everyone who alerted us, and I think it's fixed.
Yeah. And for those of you on YouTube, there's a point where my hair it gets long enough where it goes to the Napoleon Dynamite side of things with the big weird wave off to the side. Okay. And because I'm wearing a mask, except honestly, I don't know about you guys, but I look at people on TV not wearing masks these days. I'm like, ugh. Weird. That's weird.
I know.
Why are they not wearing a mask? Or the worst is when they hug people. You're like,
I know.
No, social distance. But since I wear a mask everywhere, I'm like, none of these people can recognize me. Yeah. Just don't even bother anymore. So
well, we're both having bad hair then, because I'm in full Chia Pet stage, and I think I might start growing it out a little bit more, but that it has to go through an awkward stage first.
We had known that the lady who normally cuts our hair around here had gone out of town. So my wife texted her last week and said, when will you be available for haircuts? She says, well, I just got back on Tuesday. Does next week work for you? And she looked at me and I said, nope, it does not. Push it back one more week. Yep. So we want to make sure we get that 14 days. So sometime next week, I in theory, I think it's the 10th, so maybe it's the week after that. I don't know. I am getting a haircut, and so is everybody else around here. It's gotten so bad that I've started trimming up the kids' hair. it's not something for amateurs. It really isn't. You shouldn't.
It is a
do
skill.
that. But
it is definitely a trained, acquired skill. You're
It's
not born with the
you should just
inherent
wing.
ability to cut hair and make it look decent. We can all snip some hair off.
Oh, right.
That is
Right.
possible.
That's not hard. And usually, I mean, I for myself, I like trim up around my ears a little bit and stuff like that when they gets a little long. I have no problems with that. But doing my youngest son's hair, which was out of control. He had sideburns that were like down. They're not really, just hair that was like down to his chin almost. And I was like, dude, we got to do something about this. You look awful. So he looks better now. I will say that. But she's going to look at it and go, ugh. Thank God we're cutting it short. I'm like, yeah. That's what in my head I was
you got
like,
plenty to work with still.
You got, this is going to be fine because you'll be able to fix it. All right. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com, where it will no longer bounce.
That is the hope.
Go to avrant.com. Leave a comment there. Facebook.com/avrant podcast. YouTube.com/avrant. You can reach Rob directly. Rob@avrant.com. His Twitter's @FirstReflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. My Twitter's @avrant_Tom. Though, if you want your question answered, you will send it to question@avrant.com because everything else is either answered directly and then promptly forgotten or just ignored. Or blocked in the case of YouTube.
Right.
So we just block it straight out.
Question@avrant. Right. That is definitely the place.
That's the way to go. Listeners of the week. We want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you support the podcast in some way. You do that by one of the ways, you just go into avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and leave us a PayPal donation. So we want to thank Lee, not Lee Overstreet, a different Lee, for doing that this week. So thank you very much, Lee.
Yes, indeed. Lee, thank you so much for the PayPal donation. We very much appreciate it.
We would like to also thank our 123 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon's a service you can sign up for. You can subscribe to our podcast, which is $1 a month minimum, and they'll take it from you and give it to us. And it's an ongoing subscription thing. So every month they'll take a little money from you and give it to us. So we want to thank our 123 patrons, including Nathan, who's part of the 2+ Hour Club and remembers both Dina and Liz, and when Rob was Grammar Rob. That's right. Now, and all of you people, and there's some of you guys out there right now who are like, why is he giving DJ such a hard time on the home theater, whatever its stupid name of a stupid podcast is. And
Bright Side Home Theater, by the way.
Whatever. If you go back and listen to those old episodes, I used to give Rob just as hard a time, and look at where he is now.
Yeah, you just got
on top of the world.
You just got to hang in there for 10 years there, DJ, and then...
DJ.
And then you too can
start being nice to you too.
You too can put in 11 or 12 hours of work for about $100 a month. It's not bad.
There you go.
Yes, patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anyone who would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Thanks very much to our 123 patrons over there. And Nathan, thank you very much for being one of them and clearly a longtime listener.
Right. Joe if you can't support us financially, just do something and let us know what you did so we can mention you. So Joe sent me some photos to be used on AV Gadgets, which I have been. If you people have sent me photos, I can't promise I will use them, but they're getting used.
There are
I've used
definitely photos on avgadgets.com that came from AVRant
front page too,
Most
not just like I sunk them in the articles, like front page article. That they're the featured photo of some of these guys. So Joe sent me some photos, and we also got some notes of gratitude from Nathan, Manny, Nick, and Cory. So thank you to all of you.
For sure. Joe, thank you very much for sending that to Tom and giving permission. That's the important part. Written permission for Tom to use those in perpetuity at avgadgets.com. And yes, Nathan, Manny, Nick, and Cory, thank you very much for the notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going. The encouragement is appreciated, and thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
This is a massive paragraph of text. I have not looked at these questions at all.
This is a massive paragraph?
Well, I mean, it's one big... It takes up my whole screen. So, anyways, the news, apparently. I made the news, or I somehow made the news happen, and I don't even actually... I
mean, when you forward stuff to me, even when I'm like, are we really going to talk about that? But you forwarded to me, so I'm assuming you wanted to, so here it is on the news.
Sometimes I forward you stuff just so that we can both laugh about it.
I think this was one of them. AVRant, how am I supposed to know?
I didn't send it to question at AVRant. I sent it to Rob at AVRant.
That's the same thing. If it's the @AVRant, I don't know.
Oh, well, I didn't realize that was the same thing. If you want me to use 2 different email addresses, I'll use the other one too. That's fine. I'm still, the AV Gadgets email doesn't have all the contacts, so it kind of defaults to whatever defaults. Anyways, I was forwarded a press release about a new book and test track CD from PS Audio, which is a high-end audio company. It sells really expensive crap, whatever. It's called the Audiophiles Guide, the Stereo Book, the Audiophiles Guide, the Stereo Book, unlock the secrets to great sound. Because if you're an audiophile, a true audiophile, brevity is not one of the tools in your toolbox. Anyways, it aims to guide audiophiles through setting up a stereo listening system in conjunction with Octave Records, the audiophile reference disc. There's a CD as well as an SACD, which is why I forwarded it to you, because I wanted to mention. I was like, I don't think I've got an SACD player anymore. I don't.
Do you have a
think
PlayStation 3? Then you have an SACD player.
Does that work?
Yep.
Okay, then. All right. Good. I was wondering. Okay. The SACD, which the press release says can only be played on a PS Audio SACD transport. What?
I mean, it specifically says that right in the press release. It says the SA. In fact, I think it's one of those CD/SACD on either side discs, the combo discs.
Oh, right.
And then they're like, the SACD portion can only be played, and they specifically say on a PS Audio SACD transport. I'm like, well, that is clearly untrue. It can be played on any SACD transport.
Unless it's it's not on a double-sided and it's a small one, and sometimes the small ones only work. Maybe have you ever seen those?
It still would work only on the PS Audio.
I know
there are other ones, but anyway, that's what they say.
And DVD data disc, which will let you copy the DSD files onto a hard drive for playback. For all the talk about the DSD, they go on to say how it was mastered using 192 kilohertz 24-bit process and finished in 96 kilohertz 24-bit, so the DSD files must have been converted from APCM master. The book and the disc each cost $29 each.
Yes, each $58 for the.
So $60 for this.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you're an audiophile, you're thinking $60 is a deal. But if you're like a real person,
I mean, the audiophile reference disc test material, it might be great. One would hope.
If it's well recorded,
sure.
I mean, can I pay less and just get the CD side?
Oh yeah, you can just get the CD. You don't have to get it with the book. So you could just get the CD.
That's still $30. I'm not paying $30 for a CD.
No, a bit of the pointing and laughing was just. I mean, first of all, please don't follow this guide. This is bad, not good advice. Don't follow the guide on how to set up your stereo speakers. But as far as the disc, I mean, haven't listened to this, have no idea, but I just found it humorous that they're going on and on about how they had to make an SACD. It has to be in this DSD file. It's the highest quality that anybody can get. And then they talk about how it was mastered. I'm like, well, it was clearly mastered in PCM then, because DSD is by definition a 1-bit audio system that is run at several megahertz, 1 bit. So yeah, I just found it ironic that in all the marketing hype about all of that stuff, they let the cat out of the bag.
Right. This surprise, I didn't send this. I was going to send this one to you too, but I didn't. I guess I didn't have to. So Google Stadio game studios, their first-party branches in Montreal and Los Angeles, are both closing, and their lead game designer Jade Raymond is leaving the company. Phil Harrison, the general manager of Stadio, whatever it's called.
That must have got auto corrected or something.
This is auto-corrected. Stadia all over the place. Sorry. Stadia. Yeah, I knew I was saying it wrong, but I was reading it right. Were. Anyway, Stadia. Google Stadia Game Studios is closing, and the lead person, Jade. Is that a dude or a female? I
don't know.
I feel like if it's a female, they should stay and get another job. If it's a male, I don't care.
Whatever, they're gone. They've left Google.
Anyways, Phil Harrison, the general manager of Stadia, says they're still investing in the streaming game service and investing hope. Maybe they're going to prioritize further development of the platform and leave the game making to third parties. It turns out making AAA games is expensive, and I don't know if you noticed, but the critical eye of the media is finally starting to turn upon the game making process and realizing that working people nearly to death and certainly to mental breakdowns, which if you don't think happens in game development right now, you just need to read a little bit and you'll find out how often that happens. The burnout is not just real. It's like traumatic. People end up in institutions because of how these studios work people. It's criminal. Ubisoft in particular is really, really bad. If you want to talk about a corrupt corporation, spend some time. So yeah, staying out of the AAA games is probably best. Even though Google could probably do it just fine.
They have the money. They can hire the people. They've got the resources.
But that is a hot potato. You don't want to be thrown up in the air right now. Stay away from that.
My honest biggest surprise in all of this is that somebody at Google, high up at Google, remembered that they had a game studio and remembered to close it. That is the biggest surprise to me. There you go.
All right. Well. All right, Kaleidescape has added rentals to its service, but only for those with the Strato system.
That one is spelled correctly. System. That's actually correct, yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't work on Kaleidescape Premier systems. I feel like the Premier system sounds like a higher-end system.
It is the older one, though. Strato is newer.
Oh, newer. Okay. So $795 seems to be the going price. These are still the Kaleidescape versions where they get the mezzanine files directly from the studios and create their own downloadable versions from those. These are not streaming rentals. Once you've rented the title, you have 30 days to begin watching it. Once you've started watching, you have 48 hours, which is very, very standard. You can watch the movie as many times as you want within those 48 hours. It can only play on one Strato player at a time. And if you decide to buy the movie after, half the rental price gets applied to the purchase price, which honestly, considering it's Kaleidescape, that seems pretty generous. I'm going to be honest with you.
No, that's
not bad. $795 is not bad either.
I mean, not all the titles are 4K HDR Atmos. Quite a few of them are, but some of them are HD only, 5.1 audio. I mean, they're at the mercy. Kaleidescape is at the mercy of what the studio licenses to them. It's not like they can create something out of thin air. They aren't actually making the movies. So whatever the studio's licensed to them, that's what they get. But yeah, they actually have some movies that are available in 4K HDR with Atmos that are not available that way anywhere else because they managed to get the mezzanine files directly from the studios and make it themselves.
I just gotta wrap my head around renting movies, renting streaming movies. I have to get my head around it because as a family, like I look at that price, $5, $6, $7, $8, sometimes $10 to rent a movie, and I'm like, oh my god, that's ridiculous. I've never paid that. What is this, Blockbuster? But then I realize it's actually so much better than Blockbuster, and more convenient, and it's the entire family. And for some reason, I still haven't got my brain wrapped around the fact that I can rent these movies and our entire family can watch it. And it's not just me paying $10 to watch one movie one time. It's me paying $10 for 5 or 4 usually, because my son doesn't really watch with us. 4 people to watch a movie once, and then if anybody wants to watch it again, they can. So I don't know. I just gotta fix. I gotta fix my brain on that one. So I feel like there's a lot of people out there that are probably in the same boat that I am. But I have to start talking to my wife about it too, because if she starts seeing a bunch of rentals, she'd be like, "What?" Especially since all I want to rent is horror movies.
You're right.
So I should just get Shudder.
Yes,
that's what I should do. But
that is the streaming service that is largely targeted at horror movies primarily. It's Shudder.
Yeah. I did watch The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo with
Daniel Craig version.
What's this? The Daniel Craig remake version. I really want to see the 3-movie version that's from Sweden or wherever it's from. I want to see that one, but that was the one I could see. It was a little rough to watch. There were some disturbing scenes in it, but it's well made. It's very interesting. So I don't know. It's it's not an R-rated movie that you say, oh well, my kids can handle it. This is not. This is not that one.
That earned its R-rating.
Yeah, it did. All right, comments from our listeners. Many listeners definitely enjoyed the Todd Welty interview. Nick in particular found it extremely helpful. He downloaded the spreadsheet files and used Todd's plots to figure out what ought to work best in his room based on the dimensions. He was pleasantly surprised to find that 2 subs placed middle of the front wall, middle of the back wall actually put him in the deep blue color for very good seat-to-seat uniformity, and that it was actually better in that regard than some of the 4 subwoofer configurations he had been considering. Saved him half the money he was going to spend. There you go. The efficiency in terms of raw output would be lower, but that information allowed him to feel confident in ordering 2 larger rhythmic subs rather than 4 slightly smaller ones.
Valuable info then.
And Nate, There you go. And that was Nick. Okay, I got confused there for a second because the next person's name is Nathan. Love that Todd said that he enjoys the modeling offered in Room EQ Wizard, just like the rest of us. Nathan noticed via that modeling how 2 subs, both on the front wall, can actually work for a single row of seats, but as soon as you have 2 rows, it gets much worse. Todd's examples do seem to utilize fairly large seating areas, so maybe if you only have 1 row, 2 subs up front isn't always bad, and playing with the distance setting of 1 sub in the Room EQ Wizard modeling, which should be similar to adjusting the phase knob, didn't make as much difference as Nathan expected, so that lends a little more credence to the brute force sound field management and multi-sub optimizer approach there that we were talking about on that podcast. Yeah, you're not wrong in that you can and we've had it happen on this podcast before where people are like, I have measured and my seat-to-seat uniformity is pretty good and both my subs are up front. And we're like, we're going to believe you because we have no cause not to, but nobody else should do it. And that's sort of the way I feel about 2 subs up front. Yes, you could be the dude. You could be the person who has the perfect stuff in the perfect location in your perfectly sized and shaped room where you put your seat in the perfect spot where, yes, seat-to-seat uniformity works with 2 subs up front on the front wall, but for the rest of us, don't.
It's not the first go-to, but yes, it can happen.
We still have more people. I thought we were on the questions. Joe, who made the Todd Welty introduction for us, by the way, got Netflix working via his Panasonic UB420 player connected to his Epson 2150 projector. We weren't completely spot on. It wasn't just the resolution setting of auto versus 1080p, but in the advanced settings, there's an HDCP output setting, and he changed that to HDCP 1.4 since we told him Epson was dead wrong when they told him his 2150 supports HDCP 2.2. With this set to 1.4, that it all works, so we got him pointed in the right direction.
That is right.
There you go.
Wound him up, pointed him the right way.
Okay, James from Linus Tech Tips, who mentioned this in the video not too long ago, ordered some printed fabric from SpoonFlower for his DIY acoustic panels. Unfortunately, he isn't thrilled with the result. He sent in a darker image to have printed with some brighter highlights. It all came out looking dull and washed out, like a very low contrast LCD, so he's going to try a dye sublimated option. Hopefully that will turn out better, but just some feedback since we've definitely mentioned SpoonFlower. Yeah, the dyed versions of these things work out, generally speaking, a lot better than some of the other printed options that are out there. So if that's the option, I think that's what GIK does.
Yeah, GIK does the dye sublimated. Most of the other ones that we've mentioned, like Acoustimac or Acoustic Panels Canada, they are printed. So GIK is the only one that we commonly mention that does the dye sublimated process. But yeah, disappointed to hear that because we haven't used SpoonFlower in years. Once they were perfectly in the right to say we're not going to print copyrighted poster work anymore because they were starting to get in trouble for that. So their popularity kind of died down after that, at least, amongst the home theater crowd, because a lot of people wanted to get copyrighted poster images printed, and SpoonFlower wouldn't do it anymore. But in general, back then in the day, people were, when they got them, they were happy with the quality of the prints. So I'm not sure if it was just the particular fabric that was chosen, or it just happened to be a particular image where they're printing it just didn't work for it, but I'm not sure. Sad to hear that, but good to hear that it might not be the first choice to go.
Right, and there's a lot of things to consider in that too. Specific images. I don't know how they choose what fabric they're going to print on. It's okay. So there was a time I was considering buying a franchise or opening a franchise of a business that was basically a t-shirt making business, and they did the dye sublimation process. Right. And the benefits of that is very dependent on whether or not you are able to print on a white. If you print on any color other than white, you end up having all sorts of issues and colors don't come out right and that sort of thing. So I don't know, like how they were doing things on this thing, but they may have chosen, if the resolution wasn't high enough on the picture and that sort of thing, there could be all sorts of little issues that can go on there. But I would always choose, if given the option, go with the dye sublimation on a white fabric that you then print black onto. Sure. You don't get a black fabric and try to print on top of that, because it don't work. All right, let's get some questions from some listeners here. Brian says, after many years, Brian is finally finishing his basement. Due to where the concrete foundation buttress juts in, it sort of forces him to separate the front of the room from the back of the room. He wanted to do that. So anyways, theater up front, bar and game area at the back, but the foundation dictates the exact dimensions. So the overall space is 15 by 30 feet long, but the theater area will end up being 14'8" front to back, and the concrete foundation jut in the right wall at that point. But other than that, there's no back wall to the theater. He'll have a countertop in between the theater area and the bar games area, but that's only 3.5 feet high. Ceiling height is already only 7 feet 9 inches, and that's unfinished. So the finished ceiling will be even lower. There are stairs at the back, but there's a door at the top, and there will be doors along the left wall, two closer to the back within the bar games area, into the bathroom and the mechanical room, and one closer to the front into a bedroom, which must remain easily accessible. He has it in mind that he wants 2 rows of seats, even though most of the time it will just be their family of 4 watching. He has envisioned a 110-inch projection setup to begin with, but now that he started playing dimensions, he realized that if he has a back row of seating, his front row will end up being 7.5 to 8 feet from the front wall. So let me look at this thing here.
We have a diagram from it.
The jut out comes into the room like 3 or 4 feet or something like that. It's kind of
on
silly.
The right hand wall, but that's foundation, so that ain't moving.
That ain't moving. So he's got his back row pushed almost right up against that, with a little half counter behind it, a half wall behind it, and then the front row of seats is in front of that with enough space in front of it. So he'll be like 7.5 to 8 feet from his front wall. That's if he puts the screen smack dab on the wall. He's got a door in his front, his left wall towards the front, but it's still 2 or 3 feet in. It looks like there might be a window or something on the right side, but I bet that's up high.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a window that's on the right-hand side towards the front of the room. Actually, yeah, we can see it in the photo below. It is a window there, and then...
it's a big window.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a regular-sized window.
Yep.
He says it's a basement. I always think basements, I think. Whatever. That doesn't seem very basement-y. All right, whatever. So what do we think he should go for in terms of screen size and seating distance? His goal is to plan things out and pre-wire, so it makes a big difference if he's going for projection versus a large flat panel. In the area this small, and with a second row of seats that you're almost never going to use, I just don't know why you would put it there. Instead, I would get the second row. I would put my first. If you wanted a 100 inch or 110-inch screen, I'd put my seats for where that worked for that, which would be a little bit, probably halfway between where your seats are now and where that little bulkhead is. And then I would take and if somebody wants to pull a chair in there, we can pull a chair in there. We've got bean bags. You put bean bags in there. It's a game room behind you. Why don't you have some bean bags back there, and people can sit on the floor off to the sides or whatever.
Or since you're going to have that counter back there, you could have like taller bar stools, which what he's shown in the diagram. And I don't know if this is actually what he was going to use, but he's shown recliners for both rows in the diagram.
Right.
I mean, one, I wouldn't spend the money to get recliners for the back row that is going to be rarely used. And second, you don't have to take up as much space. You can still have a second row of, bar stools that are back there. You can turn around and have them face the counter, have them facing towards the back, into the games room sometime. And then when you want to have a second row, you simply turn them around and they face the screen now. So that's kind of probably the way I would come. I probably wouldn't have a permanent second row of recliners. To me, it just doesn't make sense with what you described. All of that,
especially for how expensive they are, and honestly, if they're going to be sort of seats that you're not going to spend a lot of money on anyways, I like the bar stool idea, because if not, you end up with a second row of like a couch, like a regular couch that's back there that doesn't recline. So everybody's like, "Why you guys sit on a couch that doesn't recline?" And then you need a riser to bring it up. The bar stool solves all those problems without you having to build a riser or anything else.
Yeah, the question to me honestly becomes, are we going to have really good light control in here? Because, I mean, I have to say that when I first look at it, my thought is, given what you've got, I would probably like my first row to be a little bit farther away from the front wall than just 7.5 or 8 feet. We're talking 10 feet. But if it's at 10 feet and then the entire length that you have is just under 15 feet, it's going to be hard to have a second row of recliners, but we've solved that by having bar stools for the second row instead. So if we're at 10 feet from eyes to screen, then yeah, something like a 100-inch screen is going to be really, really nice. But are we going to have the light control in this room for a traditional projection setup? But this is where ultra short throw could totally make sense. Because I'm basically thinking, because what he's concerned about is the pre-wiring. That's really the thing. I mean, whatever display you get, you're probably not going to keep it for the rest of your life or upgrade it at some point, but where are we going to wire for this stuff? I would wire to the front of the room, like in terms of where my HDMI cable and where my, in-wall extension cord with the proper male inlet that's back at my equipment rack, so I can have my battery back up there, and then that comes and feeds either the TV or the projector. I would have that on the front wall, because I'm either going to put an ultra short throw projector right up close to the front wall, and it can definitely do a 100-inch screen. That is certainly the standard size for all ultra short throw projectors. Or if you opt to go for a flat panel instead, then you can do that too. The wiring is going to be on the front wall. In this, what you've described scenario, I wouldn't wire for a ceiling mounted projector some amount behind the seats. I'd wire to the front wall, and we're either going to go flat panel or ultra short throw.
And I would push you towards flat panel in here.
But I mean,
you've got that window to the side, and then who knows how much light control you're going to have in the back. Yeah. And then if you get a cabinet where all your gear is going to be up there anyways, and you put the panel closer to the front of it, you end up with like a 77-inch OLED or something like that, or whatever LCD you decide to go with, and you end up with the same viewing angles that you would have done anyways. And if you cheat the stuff forward a little bit, you're good there. So what about is that the end of that question?
Yeah, so I mean, if you are going to take our advice and you are going to have your seats about 10 feet away and you're going to have bar stools as your second row instead, I'd probably go for a 100-inch screen, and I'd go ultra short throw. I'd point you straight to the Optima Cinema XP2. That's where I'd go for that. If you're like, flat panel just makes more sense to me, got no beef with that, but I would probably try to be like 9 feet away from an 85-inch, because I mean, if you want it to feel at all like a theater, if you're in a room as small as mine, 75 inches is fine, but it doesn't feel really cinematic until you go bigger than average. And so I'd go for an 85, because there's really some quite affordable good ones now.
Right.
Which is his next question, really.
Right. Here we go. Sorry, I have to scroll. So there's a big price delta between the 75-inch and 85-inch flat panels. He's looking to keep costs under control. So could a 75-inch possibly make sense here? Again, it depends on where you put it and where you put your seats in relation to it. So if you decide to do kind of what we said, you can cheat the seats forward, cheat the screen forward, and you get the same viewing angle. So, Rob, it honestly doesn't matter the physical size of the screen when you're really only worried about the viewing angle when it comes to that.
And it doesn't have to be mounted on the front wall. It can go on a 3-on-1 stand, or it can just go on a TV stand and be closer to you than the physical front wall is. So there are ways that you could make it make sense. That said, Vizio's P Quantum X is $3,000 at Costco for the 85-inch size. Sony's X900H for the 85-inch size is like $2,800. So, I mean, yes, that's more expensive than the 75 inches, but it's getting darn affordable. If you were to go for a 100-inch ultra short throw, they're going to be right around that same $3,000, $3,500 price point. So, that's what I'd be looking at.
So he says surround back speakers don't make sense in here, right? But should he do a 5.2.2 or a 5.2.4? Which one and why? Well, your ceiling's open, so out of all the people that I will complain about that they shouldn't do Atmos, you're like the last one. Because it's easy for you. Once you nail down where your seat's going to be, I would do what...
Your ceiling's a bit lower, so like 4 feet in front of you, 4 feet behind you would work.
Yeah. I would definitely go with that. I think in this case, if nothing else, it sort of makes up for the fact that you don't have surround backs, and then it gives you a little bit
something that's behind you. Yeah, I mean, we're always going to say with Atmos we want 4 speakers, because otherwise you can only move sounds side to side. You can't move them forward and back at all if you don't have 4
Right.
overheads. So I'm always going to say go 4 overheads.
So that's the why.
That's the why.
You said
Yep.
what? Yeah, that's the why. Yeah. But in your case, we're never going to recommend you buy expensive in-ceiling speakers for Atmos
No, that's not
because
necessary.
even Dolby doesn't tell you to
Yeah.
do it. So why would we? But yeah, I mean, it's not going to cost you that much more money to put those speakers up there. And in-ceiling speakers, I mean, they're flush mounted anyway, so it's not lowering your height in any way, shape, or form. So I love that. So he already owns Klipsch reference series towers, center, and bipole surrounds, plus dual SVS-PC 2000 subs. He likes all of them. But are the Klipsch RF3 towers actually too big if he ends up with a short viewing distance and a flat panel?
I mean, it's not necessary, but it's not a problem.
I mean, okay, so I have been that far and maybe even closer to Klipsch towers, and I can't tell you which ones they were, but they they probably were reference series back when reference series actually meant the reference series, like the top of the line. Because the dude whose house I was at was sort of one of these guys who bought things because they were expensive. That was his sort of deal. So but they were massive towers, and we were sitting like 4 feet away from them, and they sounded fine.
Yep.
There was nothing wrong with that.
I mean, the
Are
RF
they overkill for your space and for your distance? 100%. Could you sell them and get another smaller Klipsch speaker where you literally could not tell the difference between that and the towers, and you could save a bunch of money? You could do that as well.
But yeah, the RF3s are not a massive tower. They're not enormous things that if you like them, there's no particular reason you have to get rid of them. They'll work perfectly fine.
Yeah, so he's got the cylinder subs, which are going to work out pretty well in here too. So where should the surround speakers go? He's concerned sidewall placement might be a hazard for people's heads.
You can raise them up.
I'm going to say, yeah, put them up high. I mean, it's not like it's that big of a deal. They just need to be high enough where I won't take a picture of this, but there is a shelf for my side surround speaker that my couch has maybe 2.5 feet walkway, and in that walkway is my side surround speaker. This little, maybe 4, 5, 6 inch, 6-inch side surround there, just above there, and I don't know anybody who's hit it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it hasn't happened, but I don't know anybody that's hit it. So
I mean, I'm almost in favor of mounting them on your side walls right at walking head height, like eye height.
Yeah.
So that there is no way.
That's exactly where mine are.
No way someone could walk into without it's right where their face will be.
It could be dark in there,
That's
and you
true.
could run into it. I mean, I'm not saying that.
But your Atmos speaker is going to be in ceiling. So having your surrounds on the side wall is the way to go. Even if they're elevated maybe a little bit more than ideal, it's still going to be fine. They're going to give you discreetly positioned sound that is different from your 4 overheads. So side walls is where they should go.
So yes, what speakers should he buy for Atmos positions? The 4 overhead speakers, I mean, they're going to be like a little over 4 feet away from you. So I'm not worried about level matching them with these Klipsches, as I might be if it were further distances. So Monoprice?
I'd get some Monoprice. I'd get some
That's where I would go with that.
Monoprice Alpha series. That's what I'd go for. Yeah.
There you go.
And you can get the backer boxes with them too, which is a nice feature. Monoprice has the backer boxes available for the Alpha series.
So again, he wants to pre-wire. So could we talk him through speaker placement and where should his gear rack go? He could potentially hide it in the mechanical room. Yeah, that's a big pain in the butt. I wouldn't do that.
No, you got room at the front of your room no matter what you do.
Yeah, the 100-inch screen is what you're kind of looking at. You got plenty of room underneath that for a little piece of furniture to put all your stuff in. That keeps the especially if it's an ultra short throw or the whatever that you're going with.
I mean, either way, whether you go 85-inch flat panel or an ultra short throw, have a nice credenza up at the front that's going to be below your screen. It's either holding your 85-inch or it's got the ultra short throw projector on top of it, casting upwards onto your 100-inch ultra short throw projector screen. Either way, I'd have a nice credenza up at the front of the room.
Yeah, that's where I would put it too. Side surrounds, like we said, right to your sides, up at eye height.
Well, since he's not going to have surround backs, his eye could have a little bit behind his front row seat. So this is dependent. Are you going to have your front row of seats at 8 feet like you were initially planning, at 10 feet like we're saying we would probably go for, but that would be with the ultra short throw, or at maybe 9 feet if you go for the 85-inch and actually have the 85-inch not mounted on the wall, a little forward of the wall. Your seats are 9 feet. Figure that out first. You decide that, and then have your surround speakers on the side walls and just a little behind you. We're talking, if straight ahead of you is 0 degrees, then plus or minus 110 to 120 degrees is where those go. 4 feet in front of you, 4 feet behind you for the Atmos speakers, and like basically just to the outsides of your 3-seater couch.
In line with your front speakers, wherever your front
and your front speakers are, if you go with a 100-inch screen, they're going to go just to the left and right of your 100-inch screen, and that'll be perfect.
Right. Subwoofers, where is he putting those?
Yes.
So my initial thought was put it in the midpoints of the room, which is the 30-foot length, across from each other, basically. The problem is that you're going to build this counter here, and that counter is going to give you a little bit of a walkway on what would be the rear left of your...
Yeah.
So that's exactly where you would want your second subwoofer to go.
So you're talking the midpoints of your side walls.
So now you're looking at other placement options. You've got stairs at the back there. So, we could consider... the PC 2000s are not... they're not huge, but they don't take up... They're still pretty big. But if you only have bar stools back there and that sort of thing, maybe what you do is you put your first sub in behind what would be for your home theater behind that wall, that little jut in there.
Okay.
You put it in kind of close to what I think is the window. It's closer to the window, and then you mirror that on the other side with the other subwoofer being in front of that wall, that same amount on that
so like
on your
in
left
the
side
walkway,
wall.
sort of like in front of the mechanical room door.
But it would be behind your couch still.
Yes.
So people
basically
could walk around
where your
it.
surround left speaker would be. It'd be like right below it.
Right underneath that.
Right underneath
Yes,
it.
right underneath that.
Okay.
I think that, or front left corner, rear right corner, right by the stairs.
Yeah, like of the total space. Because as crazy
space.
as it might sound, the base has no idea that you've only designated the front half of this room as the theater area.
Yeah.
The base is trying to fill the entire space, including the bar and
My
games
only
area.
problem with that is if you get the 100-inch screen, you're going to end up having to fight with your speaker placement and your subwoofer placement a little bit in that. But that, I think, as far as getting them out of eyesight, because...
And actually, you know what? If we put one cylinder sub that is... So, it'll be within the walkway that you've designated on the left-hand side of your theater, but it's a cylinder. It's soft if somebody bangs into it, and that'll prevent them from ever hitting their head on the surround speaker. It'll be right below the surround speaker. There's no way they can ever knock into it. And it's like in between your rows of seats, and then the other one, like we say, it seems a little bit weird, but it actually goes behind that concrete jut-in on the right-hand side.
All right, this question comes from Rob. Not this one, a different one. Which streaming music app is best and offers the highest fidelity on Xbox One and the Xbox Series X? He can choose from Spotify, Amazon Music, or YouTube Music. There doesn't seem to be a title app for Xbox. I don't know.
It's actually a pretty easy answer, not specifically because of how high fidelity it is, but just because one of these services is extremely well integrated into the entire Xbox system, in so much as you can start streaming music on that service and then go play a game while continuing to stream that music. It's
got to be Spotify.
It's Spotify. And it is the...
That's what all the streamers are used to. So.
It is the... so it's not lossless, but it is 320 kilobit, which is as good as lossless, in my opinion. I have never been able to discern 320 kilobit from full lossless audio. Spotify, use that.
All right. Matt is trying to advise a friend of his who wants a killer gaming setup for his Xbox Series X. This friend's basement was just finished, and it's a large 800 square foot space, but the seating distance is about 10 feet. This friend is certain they want an 85-inch TV, a 4K 120 with a VRR, or variable refresh rate, is a priority. For audio, a 5.1 setup is what they have in mind. The budget for the TV and the sound system is $4,500.
Yeah.
It can happen.
It can happen.
The problem Matt is running into is that the 4K 120 with variable refresh rate seems to be full of problems on pretty much every current TV. Sony's X900H still doesn't even have variable refresh rate. Vizio seems to have a flickering and tearing if you try to use variable refresh rate at 120 Hz. Samsung's had bugs too. The only one that seems to be working is LG's CX OLED. Good luck with that with $4,500. But that tops out at 77 inches and would blow the budget anyways. And then there's the issue of AV receivers. Matt was going to suggest saving some money and getting an older model and just relying on eARC. How should he tackle this? Maybe just focus on the TV only for the moment and wait for new receiver models with HDMI 2.1 that actually works. And what about speakers? No matter what, the TV is going to eat the lion's share of the budget. So what can we suggest here? Well,
yeah,
I would suggest that your friend move his couch a little bit closer to his stupid TV to start with and save a bunch of money that way. But since that's probably not going to happen, because that's like the...
I mean, that's not even really the issue.
I mean, it's not, but at the same time, yeah, it irritates me that somebody is so... I mean, not somebody. People, and this is constant, like my constant thing I deal with people are like, oh, I have my TV, it's 10 feet away from the wall. Where should I, how big of a TV should I get? And I walk them through it, and they're like, I can't fit that on my wall. I'm like, well, move your couch closer. Well, I can't do that. And I go to their house, I'm like, what do you mean you can't do that? This couch is just in the middle of this stupid room. You could put it anywhere. Just move it. Just move it 2 feet that way. Oh, but now my rug doesn't fit. Who gives a crap about a rug? You're talking...
Honestly, though, the TV size is not the problem.
Yeah, I know. It's the technology is like brand stupid new. So
I wish
the real solution is to wait.
Well, I wish it were that simple because I mean we've seen what TVs have been announced at CES 2021 now. We know that in general they come out in the April through June timeframe. That's when these new TVs become available. If you're willing to wait that long, it's not too bad. But Sony has made no promises of having VRR out of the box. In fact, they said VRR is not expected out of the box on the new ones, that they're still going to require a firmware update. We have no idea if that's really going to work. Samsung, unbelievably, still only has a single HDMI 2.1 input on their brand new, crazy QLED Neo thingies that they announced. I'm like, how did they... How do they still... I mean, I guess if he's only got an Xbox Series X, it's not the end of the world, but that bewildered me. What else have we got? So, I mean, Vizio isn't bringing out any new TVs this year because they announced when they brought out their TVs at the end of last year, they called them their 2021 models because they're like, yeah, this is what we got for the next year. We're in a bit of a pickle. I don't have a fantastic solution to point you to. I would... in all likelihood, recommend getting a Vizio P Quantum X and praying against all hope that they fix the stutter, because it activates, but it just has some weird stuttering things that go on with the VRR. But then I also want to take one big step back from all of this, because the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 are not really 4K 120 systems. Some games have it, but you make a whole bunch of sacrifices to get it. It's hilarious. If you're playing Dirt 5, all the crowds in the stands are gone, and all your shadows are really low resolution if you turn it to 4K 120, because it just can't render them there. If you're playing, Spider-Man, it turns off all of the wonderful, what do they call it? The ray tracing. It's all gone if you turn it to 120, because it just can't handle it. These systems aren't really powerful enough to do 4K 120 with all the bells and whistles still on. They nail 4K 60, and if you really want 120, you can put them to 1080p 120. And then they've still got all the bells and whistles, but the lower resolution. And 1080p 120 seems to work perfectly fine on all of these. It's the 4K 120 that is causing issues on some of them. The Sony has this weird blurring issue. The Vizio works fine at 120, 1080p 120, but then it flickers and gets some stuttering when it's 4K 120. So in a sense, I think they might be overhyping in their mind how much they're going to use 4K 120 with VRR because here's the thing, in 2 or 3 years they're going to bring out the mid-cycle systems and they probably will be able to do 4K 120.
Or they'll optimize somehow and be able to figure it out. So they always do that.
Honestly, if they're like, I'm buying today or I'm buying next week, I would go to Costco because they have the lowest price on a P Quantum X 85-inch right now, $3,000. That's the one I get, and I would just hope that Vizio fixes the issue they have with 4K 120 VRR.
Right. Then, I mean, obviously, we've been saying this for a while, but the receiver that he's going to be looking at is a Yamaha.
Yes.
That's the only one out there that has enough.
Go to Costco and get the TSR 700 because he wants a 5.1 system anyway. Now, that is also waiting on a firmware update before it will be able to pass through 4K 120 with VRR. We don't even know if it's totally going to work, but you can use eARC in the meantime, and it is one of the AV receivers that has promised that it will pass through 4K 120 with VRR.
So how much budget is left after this? Because he's got $4,500 on the TV was what, $3,000 or something?
Yeah,
right?
the TSR 700, if you buy it at Costco, is only $380, so under $400 for that.
So let's call it 45. So we've got about $1,000 left to spend, not including cables.
Yeah, got about $1,000 left to spend. Now, I would point you to because he's got a big room. So even though you're only 10 feet away, you're going to be running this all off of a little bit better than entry level, but a mid-level Yamaha receiver. I would go for some fairly efficient speakers. And if you're a gamer, having that crisp horn-loaded sound is really quite a likable thing, so I don't think he'd be opposed. Klipsch reference series is absolutely going to be affordable. I would point you at HSU. HSU's horn-loaded speakers, just the regular HB1 Mark II bookshelf speakers. That's where I would point you. $500 sub, though, is all we're going to be able to afford. I mean, that's either going to be a PB1000 or a mono price, but have it right next to your couch, because none of the subs you're going to get for $500 are going to pressurize an 800 square foot room. But you put it right next to your couch, and you're going to get some pretty good rumble. All
right. Julian in the UK. We have been discussing Julian's enclosed theater room with his Q acoustic speakers that he is upgrading to KEF LS50s. Well, now everything's changed. Turns out he already had a 5.1 setup using all PMC speakers in his living room, and his wife has decided they don't need 2 full TV and surround sound setups. So the enclosed room is out, and the living room will be it. Well, why don't you give her the living room and go back to the enclosed room? She can have the living room, and you go to the enclosed room. Never the twain shall meet.
I don't know, man. We're playing it on the fly with what he's saying is the sitch.
All right. Julian's consolation is that it will allow for a full 7.2.4 configuration in there until I tell him not to do the surround backs, but whatever. He can repurpose his PMC speakers as surround back, and rear heights, while his new LS50s go up front, and a pair of his Q acoustic service front heights. It'll all be handled by Yamaha RX-A3070. The Yamaha has 9 amplifiers built in. The room is still not that large, so he doesn't feel any need to get an external amp for his front speakers. That means an additional 2-channel amp will just be for rear heights. Louis suggests he wasn't sure if an amp that has his own volume knob to use would be okay. Yes, it's fine. You turn the volume knob all the way up, usually.
Yeah. If you notice with the volume knob on the external amp turned all the way up that you have an obvious noise floor that goes away as soon as you turn it down just a little, then you turn it down just a little so that the noise floor goes away. And you pull the knob off and make sure it never moves from that spot ever again.
Right. So my what is it? Whatever amp.
You've got a Dayton, a one that is no longer available.
Well, and he's in the UK. Anyways, but mine has got a volume knob and a balance knob. I wish it didn't have the balance knob, but it has volume knob, and I just turned it all the way up and left it there. And then every once in a while, if I get freaked out, I go over there and make sure it's still turned all the way up.
In the UK, from Amazon UK, so as far as I can tell, that should be available for powering your rear height speakers. You do not need anything fancy. I'm going to point you to the Fosse Audio that we've recommended for several other people, particularly for Zone 2s or patio speakers. It is a Class D for your rear heights. It is 100% fine. I think it's 80 watts a channel, something like that. It's pretty,
which is about 78 more watts than you need.
Pretty darn decent. The exact name is the TDA 7498E from Fosse Audio. We will have the link to it because something tells me one might not remember all of those letters and numbers. But that is the one. And what is it, like 70 pounds, something like that? It's not bad.
Yeah. So Cory owns a PMC TLE1 sub, which has dual 6.5-inch drivers and a 150-watt amp, and claims to play down to 22 hertz. It probably does make sound at 22 hertz. Would it be okay to pair that with an SVS PC2000, or should you stick with the previous plan of dual PC2000 subs? The living room itself is only 13 by 15, but it isn't really fully enclosed. Okay, so yeah. I'm going to look at this thing real quick because I haven't looked at it. I haven't looked at it.
I mean, it looks big because it's deep and then it's quite tall.
It's tall, thin, and deep.
Yeah, but those are only 6.5-inch
and the drivers are not... Yeah, the 6.5-inch drivers take up... So the front plate is probably 8 inches wide, but it goes like 3 feet tall and 3 feet deep, it looks like. So this is not a small sub. So it might, in fact, play down to...
Yeah, they might even have like a transmission line in there, honestly, with that kind of cabinet volume.
Right. They've got all kinds of controls on top here. Anyways, I'm trying to see if it's got a port someplace, but I only see 3...
Yeah, I imagine
it seems like it would have a...
Nobody builds a sealed box like that.
No, I don't think
crazy.
So. Anyways, I would believe this plays down to 22 hertz. Yeah. I'm just looking at it. It seems like it could play down to 22 hertz. I would believe that. I would believe that. I would still sell it and get another PC 2000.
I mean, my inclination is if there is any way, I'd go ahead and get dual PC 2000s right away. But I would not be angry at you if you decided to buy one PC 2000 and try pairing it up with this sub that you already have, this PMC sub. I wouldn't be angry at you.
So, you're going to get a couple of more, hertz lower out of the PC 2000 that you're going to get out of this thing. If it does in fact go cleanly to 22 at minus 3 dB, the PC 2000 is going to go to in room 19, 18 maybe. So it's going to be playing by itself at those frequencies. They're subsonic. You're not going to I'm not sure how you're going to experience those in this room. That's not really enclosed anyways. But you could try it. My peace of mind would be like,
let's get the 2
subs, and that would be that. Yeah, that was what I would do. All right, Mike. Mike isn't happy with the sound from his center speaker. We will recall Mike's theater where he built absorption into the wainscoting going around his room, super chunk bass traps all around the corners, and a soffit grid on the ceiling with SVS speakers all around. He started with SVS Prime Center since it's physically fit more easily below his projection screen. But after getting the Pinnacle Towers, he decided to get the Ultra Center that he truly wanted, and we assured him that laying the SVS subwoofer at the front of his room on its side would be totally fine. That's true. So that serves as the stand for his Ultra Center now, with some foam wedges separating the center and sub so that he can tilt it. And I'm looking at it. Oh, these are really nice. Oh yeah. Yes. These are nice pictures. Yeah. This is good. And the foam wedges underneath his sub are hilarious and also effective. And this is this guy right here took the 30% to heart. He did some extra credit in here.
But he made it look real nice.
It does look really nice. These are very nice pictures. I like this. So he's not happy with the center channel, though. That's what we know so far. All right. Mike intends to take Room EQ Wizard measurements and send those to us later to see if they clearly indicate a problem. As far as you can tell, the bass response from his dual subs, middle of the front wall, middle of the back wall, looks very good in Room EQ Wizard, and he's using an 80 Hz crossover with all of his speakers. The issue he's hearing is the center sounds harsh sometimes, which was the same issue he had with the Prime Center, and he had thought the upgrade to the Ultra Center would fix it. It isn't just a volume thing, because it doesn't have to be particularly loud. He has tried physically disconnecting all the other speakers just listen to the center on its own, as well as the center plus subs. No matter what, this occasional harshness still happens sometimes, and he would also describe the sound as occasionally sounding hollow. The rest of his speakers all seem fine. Pinnacle Towers, Focal Superbird surrounds and surround backs, Sonus in-ceiling Atmos speakers. He hasn't tried a Phantom Center, though. He intends to in order to compare. His Denon X6400H is powering everything, and he intends to try running a temporary new speaker wire just to test if that's somehow the speaker wire that was pre-run inside of his walls. For now, he'd just like to know if we have any suspects. Why would his center speaker have the displeasing harshness and hollowness sometimes when none of the other speakers do, and what Room EQ Wizard measurements might be useful in revealing the culprit? He's tried changing the tilt of the center and the amount of the decoupling as well, but it made no difference. So any ideas?
I mean, I want to say right off the top, this is not what we would expect from an SVS Ultra sound. We wouldn't expect it from the Prime.
I have one
either. But yeah, harshness is not something that we would anticipate from this particular speaker. Nor is a hollowness type of sounding.
So a hollowness to me suggests that something is like I'm looking at the back of the speaker and it's blowing into the wall, which is fine. But there's a screen there right there. So if the center channel, it's got dual ports in the back, but he's far enough away from the wall as far as I can see. I think it's perfectly fine. If something back there behind it was physically moving because of the air coming out of the ports, but honestly, there's just not that much air coming out of the ports. I would be very surprised.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised. It is essentially, I mean, it's not quite proud of the sub that it's sitting on,
but still, I mean, it's got plenty.
It's got plenty of room below it, and the angle of it is such that it's essentially fine. The fact that it's happened with two different speakers, though, is what concerns me.
Neither of which we would expect to have this type of issue.
I would have said, if you had just called us after the first one, I would have said it's broken, send it back. I mean, I because that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like there's a ripped woofer someplace. There's a rip in the surround that's allowing that harshness, that you're hearing at certain frequencies. It's activating that tear within your speaker. That would be my guess, or a voice coil misalignment or breakage or something. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen.
Part of me wonders if he's actually just hearing really, really accurate revealing sound for the first time, because there's a whole bunch of dialogue in TV and movies that isn't that
so
great.
This is the question that you and I are guilty of, and I realized that this week when I was writing an article. You and I are guilty of assuming people are watching things and using good quality sources and sound when they're doing these tests. Like, I was listening to ZZ Top and it's real harsh. I'm like, yeah.
Well, it's not just that. Like, I value knowing for certain that my audio system is producing things very accurately. That way, when things don't sound so great, I know it's the recording's fault and not the playback system's fault. Some people want a system where everything they listen to sounds really good, which, hey, I can't blame somebody for that. But the simple fact of the matter is there's a ton of recorded content that has issues. Part of me wonders if that's the problem. Like, because he said he's not describing it as being literally all the time. He's like, sometimes I get this harsh sound in my ears that seems to be coming from the dialogue in the center channel, and I don't like it. I'm like, I wonder if it's just.
I think what he should do is play a sweep through his center channel.
Yeah, agreed.
And listen to that. And if you play so I wrote an article today that's not going to be published till, I don't know, maybe next week. I don't know, but it's about subwoofers and going from a bass module to a real subwoofer for the first time, and how people freak out. And they're like, it doesn't sound right. It's not making enough noise. I thought it was going to be louder. I thought all these things, right? Well, they look at the physically larger box and they assume it's going to be that much louder. Like, it's not going to be that much louder. In fact, it's going to be quieter because your last bass module was farting out all kinds of noise all over the place. And yes, you associated that with bass, but you were wrong. So, what people need to do is, once they get that new speaker, that new subwoofer, that new center channel in this case, they need to have faith that their system is reproducing, just like you said, the sounds honestly and correctly. And once they know that for sure, then they'll no longer attribute negative experiences to the speakers. They'll go, there's something wrong with this disc streaming service,
because I mean, like,
recording.
There are a gazillion and one speakers that do not have linear high frequency extension that roll off well before the full extension up into the high frequencies. If this is your first time hearing a speaker that accurately plays up there, it can sound bright, it can sound harsh with certain recordings. All it's doing is telling it like it is.
You might be hearing the top end of every recording for the first time.
I know.
This may be the first time you've ever heard above like 12
I mean, especially
12
because
kilohertz.
he's gone to the extent of really well designing and treating his room and all this stuff. And it's like, it might just be revealing for the first time how a lot of recordings are not that great. This is something you and I take for granted. Like, yeah, we know there's a whole bunch of recordings that aren't that great. But if you haven't experienced it before, it can be jarring. So part of me wonders if is that.
I mean, so if he plays a sweep.
Yes.
At a fairly loud volume. I'm not saying you have to go all the way to reference, but a fairly loud volume. If you play a sweep a number of times through your center channel and it just sounds like a sweep, it doesn't go weird at some point.
Crackly or weird or harsh.
Hollow or crackly or whatever. That should tell you something. That should tell you that what you're hearing is not coming from the speaker. The hollow thing is kind of getting me. The only other thing is you do have your speaker on top of a subwoofer.
Yeah.
I mean, the subwoofer could be hitting and physically shaking your speaker in some way. It shouldn't with those foam things on top, but the foam,
I don't know, man. I mean, that one in his description was like rarer than the harsh sounding, and I'm like, I don't really think it might just be the recording. But he asked what could he measure, because I mean, just showing us a frequency response graph, probably not going to be able to tell anything. I mean, other than if there's an obvious crazy tip up or tip down, but that's not really going to help. Even the waterfall graph isn't really going to tell us much, because this isn't like a reflection issue. This isn't, dialogue is hard to understand. It's not that. What you would really need to do are take impulse measurements so that you can see total harmonic distortion plus noise. That's what we need to look at and see if there's some crazy harmonic distortion spike somewhere, because what you're describing would be like a distortion issue. So that's my thoughts. And honestly, my number one culprit is that I think you might be hearing really accurate, transparent sound that is not masking how a whole bunch of recordings in the world are really not that good.
Right. And this is such a common phenomenon too. That's such a common thing, and that's why I was writing about it today. And I kind of realized that I myself have done this a number of times in the past, where I get a speaker in and to review, and it's completely different than any other kind of speaker I have heard before, and I play a recording, and I'm like, man, there's something wrong with the speaker, and I realize. After some time, I realized it's not the speaker, because the speaker sounds fine with everything else. So how come this recording sounds bad? And I realize it's the recording. So this is somebody who's been reviewing stuff for many, many, many years. So experiment. You have to come to your own moment of belief in your system as being good, because I believe and I objectively know that it is good, and your room is phenomenal.
Right.
So
I can say which is, if you do play the sweep and you do take the measurements, and the sweep sounds like all the frequencies came out even, and the measurements say, you got flat frequency response and the total harmonic distortion plus noise looks perfectly reasonable. If that's what it comes out with, there is nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong with using your Odyssey editor app, and for your center speaker, building in a bit of a high frequency roll-off, start it at 8 or 10 kilohertz, and just give it a nice little slope downward, because a ton of speakers have that built into them anyway. And if you're just like, I realize now that this is accurate sounding, but I don't like it, and I'm not enjoying my theater the way I envision, there is nothing wrong with making your experience more enjoyable by giving yourself a little high frequency roll-off.
Could it be a damage in wall speaker wire?
I mean, I like his idea of just running a temporary external wire.
I would definitely do that. That's one thing I would definitely do. That's one thing that, as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, because a lot of times it sends you into protection mode, right? Your receiver into protection mode, but there's usually a weird screech or weirdness beforehand. But if it doesn't touch enough,
I don't know,
so that I've never heard of this happening, but it's possible. I would definitely play a sweep. I would definitely run an independent speaker wire and test that. I don't believe it's the speaker. I don't believe it's the amp. I don't believe it's the room. because I'm looking at your room, and I would love to live there.
The sweep will reveal most
after COVID.
to you.
Yeah. All right, Manuel, sorry. He says just call him Manny.
Nope. It's been butchered too many times.
I'm gonna do it. I'm just gonna keep going with it, man.
You've done it now.
It's over now. Is it Manuel or Manuel?
He has never said. He's just like,
well, why does he
I
say?
don't know. Now he just says.
Well, then I'm just gonna call him whatever I want to call him.
There are people who spell their name that way who say Manuel, and there are people who spell their name that way and who say Manuel. So we don't know. He's never said. He said just call him Manny.
No, I'm not doing
I know.
That. That's fine. Based on our recommendations, Manuel bought 6 Ascend HTM200 SE speakers. 4 of them got mounted on the ceiling, about 5 feet in front and 5 feet behind his main seats for Atmos, and the other 2 got mounted on his sidewalls, basically straight to the sides, but due to door placement and the mounts he used, all 6 are actually pretty close to the same height in the end. On first listen, and after getting them mounted, they sound great. So I'm looking at them. I can't see them.
Yeah, his ceiling is black. They are black, little squares.
Right.
You can probably see the one that's on the side wall in the taller
I can see the one on the side wall. They are almost essentially, because he's got, it's like an aimable mount thingy. It's coming down off the ceiling quite a bit. Since the surrounds on the side walls are actually quite close to a ceiling, do they have to directly face each other as we've suggested, or does it make sense to have them tilted down just a bit? And with the 4 Atmos speakers mounted to the ceiling, it just felt weird to have them all pointed straight down, so we tilted them to aim towards the seats. As mentioned, they sound great, so it's okay them having facing the seats. Well, since you're going to do whatever the heck you want to do, so I'd say yes, you can aim them, but I will say for the side surrounds, I would be okay with you tilting them slightly.
Those ones I would have tilted. Yeah.
The Atmos speakers, I would have gotten a more flush mount and just pointed them straight down so that they're, there's a little bit of height difference, not much, but a little bit.
But once again, the real point is, can you tell that sounds moved side to side, front to back? And it sounds like he can, because he's like, hey, I'm liking this experience. That is fine, dude. You've done good. You got really good speakers, and if you're happy with those results and you're hearing those sounds move around above you, then job done.
He has made some DIY panels, some absorptive panels, but he's waiting on some test prints on fabric to fully complete them. He's got 3 on the back wall, 3 on each side wall, and 2 on the front wall, 1 behind each of the main left and right speakers. The panels are 2 feet by 3 feet, and he mounted them at the same height, which puts the bottom of the panels right at the tops of the seat backs. The seats have low backs, so your head is above the seat back when you're sitting. That height puts the bottoms of the panels directly behind the tweeters of his front left and right speakers, but there's bare wall directly behind the woofers. So should he move the panels lower? You should move them so that the port, if there's a port at the back of your speakers, fires into the panel.
Agreed. Yeah, and those I'm pretty sure he's got Ascend Sierra 2 speakers, just like I do. The port on those is at the top. So
maybe he's already there.
I believe you are perfectly fine with where they are, and it does look good because his pictures are mounted at that height and everything. So it all looks nice and symmetrical and even around his room, and the placement makes sense. So I think you've done perfectly fine. No need to lower them.
Yeah. Jason, on our advice, Jason bought an NVIDIA Shield Pro. Oh, we don't suggest that anymore, Jason. I'm sorry. You should take it back.
Don't freak him out, poor guy.
Oh my God! Sell it before everybody else catches wind. You didn't hear? You didn't hear? They explode.
Oh, gee, definitely don't say something like that. We are being facetious. We're joking. You got a good one.
All right. He's pleased with it so far, but there's one little hiccup. It exploded.
Right.
Or as my kids say, it disploded. All right. If he goes into the settings, he can see all the supported resolutions and frame rates. He's using a Denon X4500H and LG C8 OLED. All of the listed resolutions and frame rates work except for one. 4K at 59.94 hertz, Dolby Vision and HDR10 ready. If he tries that, his OLED momentarily flashes that it went into Dolby Vision mode, but then the screen goes black and it stays that way. If he lowers the frame rate, it works. If he keeps a higher frame rate but drops Dolby Vision, it works. The wrinkle is that he is using an HDBaseT connection between his AV receiver and TV. It claims to be 18 gigabits per second with support for up to 4K at 60 hertz YUV444, but it doesn't explicitly say anywhere that it supports Dolby Vision. So is that the issue, or is there something else you can do with the settings? So HDBaseT, for those of you that haven't heard us say it in years, because we haven't talked about it in years, it's essentially an HDMI solution that uses Ethernet.
Yes.
It's proprietary, it's expensive.
It's a converter.
But
it converts a regular HDMI plug to go over an Ethernet cable. Yeah.
And it goes for very long distances, much easier and cheaper. But almost nobody uses it because the converters are so expensive. But if you have a long run, this is a way of getting there. So 4K at 60 hertz, YUV, whatever that is, I can't remember. 444 should be full bandwidth at 60 hertz 4K, which means it should work.
Didn't mention a bit rate though. Was it 10-bit, 12-bit, 8-bit? Wasn't mentioned in there.
Right.
So what I can tell you with the NVIDIA Shield Pro is that when you have it in the Dolby Vision and HDR10 ready setting, it will only do that at 12-bit. It will only
so maybe that's the problem.
Do it at the highest thing. On top of that, HDBaseT is a compression-based solution. They can't actually send that raw bitrate over Ethernet cable. It does itself apply a compression algorithm to it. So there is a codec involved in HDBaseT, and I strongly suspect that is ultimately the issue, that it can't take the full 4K, 60 hertz, 12-bit 444 signal and get that through its conversion process. I had this issue trying to send that exact same signal just through my Marantz SR7010 AV receiver, which, like your HDBaseT, says it can do 4K 60 444. Couldn't do it with the full 12-bit thing going on. And and again, if I dropped the frame rate to 24 frames per second, or if I went down to 10-bit, which lowered me to HDR10 only, no Dolby Vision, which is exactly what he described, it worked. So I do suspect that is your bottleneck. You can get long HDMI cables now for not ridiculous prices, because you don't need, ultra high speed. You just need a high speed premium HDMI cable to get this done. So that is what I would suspect. The way you could confirm this is you can, of course, plug your NVIDIA Shield Pro directly into your C8 OLED. You could rely on eARC to send the audio back to your Denon. If that works, then you know that it's not a problem between your display and your NVIDIA Shield Pro, and it definitely shouldn't be. And then you could try, I don't know if there's a way you could temporarily move your Denon into the room and use a short HDMI cable and see if it passes through the AV receiver. Then you would know for sure it's the HDBaseT causing this. But I do strongly suspect it is.
So this is Nick, Ian, and Manny again?
All related to this topic, so put it all together.
All right. Nick thought our arguments for simply zooming a projector instead of using an anamorphic lens made sense, but he's heard one more argument for using the lens that he'd like our take. Some projectors, especially ones with laser light engines, can basically apply global dimming to the image, which increases perceived contrast. If you're viewing a mostly dark image, the lamp will dim to give you better black levels, and if the image is mostly bright, the lamp will ramp up to give you an overall brighter scene. So the argument goes, if you use anamorphic stretch and an anamorphic lens, you'll get a brighter image, because when the black bars are there, they're considered as part of the image, and they bring down the average brightness level as a whole. In other words, these global dimming lamps or lasers will be useful if it will always be darker if you have black bars, because a sizable percentage of the image is always black. Take away the black bars with the anamorphic stretch and they get to strut their stuff and go full brightness. What do we think? Any truth to that? I don't know, but I will say that if an engineer out there allowed the black bars to be considered part of the image when doing this weird thing that they're talking about, that person should be fired. That's what I say.
I am trying to recall, because I remember a video about this issue where they did show how, when you've got the black bars on screen, it would prevent whatever particular projector it was at the time, and this is going several years back, that it did actually prevent it from getting it to its maximum peak brightness, because it was just looking at the screen as a whole, and it would say, okay, 27% of this image is pure black, and so it would never ramp up all the way to maximum brightness. It's not completely unfounded what has been mentioned here. However, on the model, like he was asking about JVC's projectors. I'm like, yeah, JVC's projectors don't do this. They don't do this global dimming thing with their lamp because their panels are so darn good that they don't have to. They've just got the inherent contrast right in there. The lamp stays at whatever you set the lamp. If you put a high lamp mode, it's there at high lamp mode. It's not pumping the lamp. But there are projectors that do. There are quite a few DLP projectors, including not very expensive ones, that will pump the lamp based on the average light level of whatever it is you're watching at the time. So it's not completely unfounded, but on the higher end ones, on the JVCs for sure, this just doesn't happen. But yeah, there's some truth to it. That crazy $80,000 Sony laser projector. Like, it does this. It does global dimming. It changes the intensity of its laser light source depending on but like Tom alluded to, how intelligent it is. Can it tell, oh yeah, there's black bars here all the time. Maybe I'm still going to allow the rest of the image to be maximum brightness, and I'm not too worried about those black bars. I don't really know. I don't know what algorithms they're using in there. So yeah.
Excuse me.
I'm not going to tell you it's totally out of the realm of possibility, but with a JVC in particular that you were asking about, it is not an issue.
All right. I just don't do the anamorphic lens thing, please.
They're so expensive.
Can we let that? They're so expensive. They're just so expensive. And then artifacts. Yes. We care more about a little bit of brightness, a little bit of contrast, than we care about visual artifacts. We care more about that. Artifacts, people. Mm-hmm. All right. Ian wanted our take on the question that was sent to Sound and Vision. I don't answer Sound and Vision questions. Skip! Sorry. Will I lose pixels and brightness when zooming a projected image? The person who sent the question said they read on a screen manufacturer's website that you lose 25% of your projector's light output to the black bars, and that having the black bars all the time shortens the life of your projector because it has to absorb all that light and turn it into heat. I'm going to have to blow my nose because I am sneezing. I'm going to sneeze again. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I will try to get through this question and then Rob will answer. Right. Sound and Vision replied that zooming your projector and keeping the black bars won't shorten your projector's lifespan. They debunked that one, but they agreed that an anamorphic lens setup would be brighter because it uses all the projector's pixels, and that is the main reason to consider an anamorphic lens. What did they get right and what did they get wrong or neglect to mention? We already talked about this. You zoom it in and you get a little bit brighter, and you use an anamorphic lens and you get a little bit brighter, and it works out to be exactly the same.
Pretty darn close to the same. Yeah, what I am going to do is highly recommend reading an article from Projector Central, which it's older at this point, because I mean they're talking about back when we were still doing like 720p versus 1080p projectors, and 720p was like still more common. But the Projector Central article was 2.35 widescreen home theater, should you or shouldn't you? That is the one you will look for if you want to Google it, but we'll have the link for it in the show notes. Do a really good job throughout that article of describing the exact pluses and minuses of this question. This question has been around for a while. It won't shorten the life of your projector. That's a ridiculous statement to make. That is absolutely not going to be the case. But yeah, the reasons to consider the anamorphic lens, I actually really like the conclusions at the end of the Projector Central article, because they're like, the number one reason that you should really consider a 2.35 to 1 screen and anamorphic lens is because you think it's cool. And
that's okay. That's an okay reason. That's the reason why I say that you can do it. If you bring it to me like, I've always wanted one, my dad had one, I think it's cool. All right, fine, get it. Fine.
Yep.
Just fine.
For the, $5,000 to $12,000 that it costs on top of the cost of your projector,
Whatever.
when you could just zoom the projector in, but
whatever. Knock yourself out. I mean, people don't buy Ferraris because they need to drive 500 miles an hour, however fast those stupid things go. They buy them because they think they're cool.
Yep.
And they feel cool when they have them, and they feel cool driving around them. And you're going to feel cool every time your lens goes in front of your stupid projector. And I'm going to think you wasted a bunch of money, and that's stupid. But that's okay.
I liked what they mentioned, that Projector Central. I like that it's still an older article that's still there, because they were like, well, one of the real advantages is that if you're using a 720p projector on a 135-inch screen, that just having more pixels, however you get them, even when you're optically, optically stretching and digitally stretching the image and getting artifacts, it's just valuable to have all those extra pixels. When you're using a 4K resolution projector, that's not the case anymore. It just doesn't apply anymore.
So just to come at things from a different angle, can we make, you need a lens shift for that. Can we make any arguments for using an anamorphic lens? How about just 2.35 to 1 screens in general? In Manny's case, he's got a fireplace below his screen, which limits the maximum height, but he could keep his current screen height and go wider if he opts for 2.35 to 1. Manny, Manuel, that is the only reason that I have ever been okay with getting a 2.35 to 1 is because you have your restricted height, and then you at least then you can get a larger screen for when you are watching those anamorphic or whatever weird ratios they have out there these days, 2 to 1 and everything else they're talking about.
I mean,
look, that's the only thing I can think of. I have to get more Kleenex. Jeez, I have not sneezed in like a year.
Well, you're catching up now. To be perfectly honest, if I had my druthers and cost were not a concern, and here is where I would put my money instead of into an anamorphic lens, I would have a screen with 4-way masking. I absolutely would. That would be my top choice if it were affordable and I could do it, because I want to have the absolutely enormous IMAX screen. Then I want to be able to mask the tops and bottoms down to CinemaScope. And yeah, when it's a 2.35 to 1 movie that doesn't have any subtitles below, into the black bars, or it doesn't change aspect ratios, then yeah, I would have that top and bottom masking. And then I would also have masking that is able to come in from the sides, full 4-way masking, because then I could have HD TV images that are 16:9 ratio, but the same height as CinemaScope, but just not as wide. Yeah, I would do that. If it's 4:3, I can mask in the sides and partially mask the top and bottoms and have a true Academy ratio screen. So yeah, I would go 4-way masking, but even if I went 4-way masking, I wouldn't have an anamorphic lens. I would rely on zoom and lens memory to fill the aspect ratio and the screen size of that 4-way masking. So I can get behind different screen shapes. To me, the less expensive, Tom always thinks it's ridiculous, but the less expensive way of doing it without 4-way masking is having 2 screens, but both of them 16:9. That's how I would get away with it. They'd both be 16:9, just a smaller one and a bigger one. Yeah, there you go. So I will basically never make the argument for an anamorphic lens, but I can make the argument for a CinemaScope screen in certain situations, and Manny's is one situation that does make sense.
Twice now I've gone to get Kleenex, which is just toilet paper, from the bathroom, and twice I have come back and thought to myself, I should have grabbed some more. Bring back with me. But maybe the third time's a charm, Rob. We'll see. All right. Next question. Let's get out of this anamorphic crap. Mark has an Onkyo TXNR646 receiver. He set its speaker channels configurations to 5.1.2. That gives him the option to name a pair of his overhead speakers as any of the Atmos positions. He went with top rears, as that matches the placement of the speakers. DTS-X seems to work perfectly, but isn't sure about regular 5.1 DTS or 7.1 DTS HD master audio. Is his receiver smart enough to notice that he has top rears and use them as surround backs for 7.1 DTS HD content? Does it just leave the top rear silent for 5.1 content? He's been manually switching the configuration in his receiver, but he's wondering if that's necessary. It does have the up mixer. I mean, it must have the up mixer,
It has
right?
the Neural X up mixer. Okay, let's go through these. DTS-X, it's working. It's going to take the DTS-X soundtrack. It's going to say you have 5.1.2. And so when sounds are overhead, it's going to put that into the 2 overhead speakers that you have available. And if it was like a, mix that had sounds directly behind you, those are going to get mixed into your surround speakers. Just like, if you were listening to a 7.1 soundtrack on a 5.1 system, you're not going to lose any sounds. It's just going to get put into the speakers that you do actually have. Now, the step down from that with 7.1 DTS HD master audio soundtracks, those are not going to get played in 7.1. It is not going to, on the fly, magically change your top rears into surround backs and put the surround back channels into your top rear speakers.
No.
It is, if you do not use the up mixer, right? So if your listening mode is DTS HD master audio and it matches the signal that's coming in, then you are going to be hearing that in 5.1. Your top rear speakers are going to be silent. The only time your top rear speakers are going to make sounds when listening to a 7.1 DTS HD Master Audio soundtrack is if you engage the DTS Neural X upmixer. And then it is going to upmix some sounds into those top rear speakers. Otherwise, they will be silent. Same thing for vanilla 5.1 DTS. It will, if you're using the DTS listening mode, you're just going to be hearing 5.1. If you apply the Neural X upmixer to it, it will upmix some sounds into your top rears. But you will, in this scenario that you've described, never have surround backs because you don't have surround backs, that you haven't configured your AV receiver to do that, and it's not going to switch between them.
Yes, that's the number one thing to remember is that it will not assume, well, it's far enough back there. We'll just we'll just put surround back stuff in there. So yeah, you will always want to use the upmixer. Sure. I mean, I would always use the upmixer. You could also, I mean, I don't see the reason why you couldn't just rename those things middles, but it probably doesn't make it functionally.
I wouldn't really make any difference. No.
Yeah. Cory.
Cory has second question of
miss. Second question. I didn't even see that. If he has three-way speakers up front, does it matter if his surrounds and top rears are two-way versus three-way?
No.
Nope.
Not a whit.
Couldn't matter less. They could be one way. It would be hard.
I mean, as long as they're
Atmos speakers could definitely be.
They probably
one way.
could, yeah.
But it would be hard to find a one-way speaker to be your surrounds. But no, it doesn't matter. And this kind of harkens back to the question we get every once in a while about speaker number of drivers, size of drivers, configuration of drivers, material of woofers, that sort of thing. If I've got fiber cone woofers, can I match them with an aluminum cone woofer? I'm like, yeah, the sound doesn't really care at all. Though I do love the reviewers who are like, Kevlar woofers have a more textured sound. I'm like, shut up.
Because they looked at it and they're like, I can
see
the weave, yes.
I can see the texture, therefore I can hear the texture. Yes, you're dumb.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is a design choice on the part of the speaker designer and manufacturer. It is a matter of, I mean, all any speaker is trying to do, should be trying to do, is cover the entire audible frequency range, or maybe not all the way down to 20 hertz in a speaker, but you're trying to cover that whole audible frequency range as accurately as you can. Now, if you're going for a speaker with tremendously high output capabilities, it might just be necessary to use more drivers. You just might need more surface area. That's the only way you can get that loud, or you have to put it into a cone or something like that, into a horn or into a compression-loaded, situation, something like that. It might be the only way to get to that output level, and maybe the only way you can maintain smooth frequency response is to have a dedicated mid-range driver. That's the only way you can get there. So it's that type of design choice, but in almost any home theater for surrounds and top rears, it's the likelihood that you're actually running into requiring a three-way speaker design to hit output levels is slim to none.
I mean, they have to be way back there. like you need the binoculars to see your speaker. There it is. I can see it. Cory has now built 3 DIY subs. Don't get it right the first time. Try again. Sorry. He already had a pair of replica Earthquake Supernova MK4.
It's just all the words. It's an earthquake. It's a supernova. I mean, at least they didn't call it black hole. At least it didn't take it all away.
Replica Earthquake Supernova Rock Your World MK4X. Little lowercase I. Sorry. 12-inch subs, which appear to be a sealed design with 500-watt amps. I'm sorry. It's a funny name.
It is.
Now he's built a ported Dayton Ultimax. There's the X. 18-inch in a huge triple ported enclosure powered by a 300-watt amp. It's got 1,200-watt peak, but who cares? His room is... Oh, okay. The little cursor was on top of the N. It may look like an H. His room is not a perfect rectangle, but it's not far off, and it can be enclosed. He's using 5 DefTech speakers and 4 monoprice caliber in-ceiling speakers for Atmos, 135-inch screens, and 6 2x2 panels, 2 on each side wall, 2 on the back wall, but spread to either side as his pair of computer desks take up the middle of the back wall. Okay. So he's got how many? 6, 2 on each wall. Okay, so 2 on each of the side walls and 2 on the back wall. Okay. It's a very white room.
It is.
Like gray couches. It's clean, though. It looks nice.
It does, yeah.
Looks pretty good. All right. Where are all these stupid subs?
The gigantic rectangle to the left of his
front
screen.
Left?
That's his Dayton Ultimax.
It is massive, people.
3 ports on top.
It's going. So his big, how about his 135-inch screen?
Yes.
Is nearer the floor, but not too far off. But his subwoofer comes over a third of the way up the screen. It's
a big boy.
Not small.
It is not.
It's not
You
small.
can also see the 12-inch subs that he built before, which, judging just by their box size, I'm like, those have to be a sealed design. That must be.
Yeah, sealed design. Yeah. So he was thinking his new 18-inch sub would live in the front left corner, and then once you move that thing, I think that's where it goes, right? I think you build it in place. I think that's the way I would do it.
It drills itself into
Holy
the floor.
Moly, I think it's got to weigh like 200 pounds.
Go ahead, try to move me. I dare you.
Did you put it on casters? Because that's about the only way you're getting it out of that place. He's thinking his new 18-inch sub would live in the front left corner. Then he would stack his pair of 12-inch subs in the rear right corner. That would actually result in a similar amount of cone area, 2 12s versus 118. But he isn't sure if that's the best way to deploy 3 subs in this room. Should he spread out the 2 12-inch subs, maybe one in each of the back corners? What do we say? Well, we talked to Todd Welty about this, and there's a bunch of different options that you could do, including the Getty or whatever his name was.
Earl Getty's approach.
Yeah, I would not. I would put
not
the front left
scenario.
corner with this. I would put the big sub in the front left corner and stack the 2 12s in the rear right corner and call it a day.
Yeah, the 2 12s are going to need all the help they can get to try and get anywhere remotely close to the output and extension of the triple ported enormous 18-inch subwoofer. I mean, what you really...
I was going to build 2 of them, but they didn't have any more wood at Home Depot.
Right. I mean, you kind of need 2 of those 18-inchers to have reasonably... Although, I mean, for this room size, you don't... It's enclosed. You don't need...
It's enclosed. You don't need any of this.
That thing. I don't know what's going on there. I mean, look at the... look.
He likes to build subs. Don't give the guy a hard time. Next time you want to build one, build me one. Yeah. Send it over here.
Who am I to talk? PC 4000s, a pair of them in my room.
He's got these itty-bitty speakers all over his room.
Right.
And then
the towers are fairly large.
Ginormous subs.
The center is diminutive, and the surrounds are very small, and then all the speakers, including the towers, can fit inside of the subwoofer.
I think you could drop them all down the port and never see them again. I think that would be the end of that. So he says, any glaring issues that stick out about his room to us? You got really small speakers, dude. No. He plans to upgrade soon to a BenQ HD3050 projector, ceiling mounted just behind the seats.
So the room is very white. That is what sticks out to me. For a projection setup, the room is very white.
I guess I can see that. That's something that you could adjust. Is it bothering you? Do you think it's bothering you? And you could maybe, just if you want to keep the walls this way and the ceiling this way, you could just buy black fabric and put it everywhere. But that's about the only thing I see. I think this room looks great. I'm giving you a hard time about your little speakers just because your subs are so huge. But
plus a 135-inch screen, it makes that center look a lot smaller than it actually is.
I know it's probably a reasonable size speaker, but
the 135 is big. I think you could probably use more acoustic treatment in here. I don't think you've hit 30%.
No.
But I would try to, if at all possible, I might darken this room with some fabric, particularly front wall and maybe the front portion of the ceiling or something like that. And then some more acoustic treatment could probably be beneficial. Try to get yourself closer to the 30%.
Flanking both sides of your front your screen, I think I would double up everything you've got on the side walls for sure. Yeah. I would actually quadruple everything. I would put another 2x2 panel, if that's what those are, above the ones you currently have, and then put 2 more of them in between. Yeah. Is how I would do that. And then I would also consider putting more on your back wall.
Yep.
Yeah. And then we didn't even really talk about corner traps. I don't really see any place for a corner trap in here.
The rear right corner could do a trap there.
No, the rear right corner is where the subwoofers are, right?
Yeah.
You could
go above that. You could corner trap above your enormous sub in the front left corner, and
sure. Don't block the ports.
Right.
Than that. We got time. Nathan. So there's a local seller in Nathan's area offering a Marantz SR7010 receiver. Nathan already owns a SR6011, but he has a family member in need of a receiver. So what are the differences? Would it make sense for Nathan to keep the 7010 for himself, even though it's 1 year older? Before Rob gets too excited, he does not plan to switch out surround backs for front wides.
I don't know how you're.
I don't know what
sleep at night.
Differences here. I sleep really super well. You would be shocked how well I sleep.
So besides,
someone could steal my surround backs, I'd be like, I didn't even notice.
Right. Besides front wides, which would be the main reason, because you got to go back that far or come forward to the 6700H to get your front wides. But besides that, the biggest difference is that the SR6011 was the very first year that you could use the Odyssey Editor app, and the SR7010 cannot use the Odyssey Editor app. So that is one functional difference there. They both have XT32, but yours that you already have can use the editor app, and the 7010 was 1 year before the editor app was applicable. Let's see, you got a front panel display.
I go my whole life and never touch that editor app again. I'd probably be just fine. I'll be honest with you. I haven't done enough with it to even notice a difference, and I have done things with it. I just afterwards went, well, that was a humongous waste of my time and $20. Thank you very much.
You get a full front panel display behind the little flip-down flap on the SR7010. You only have the porthole on the 6011. You do have a larger power supply in the 7010. That might be a potential reason you would consider it. It is a larger power supply model. Now, let's see. Is there anything else of significance? You have the option of adding Oro 3D to the SR7010. It's a $200 upgrade just to add Oro 3D, but the option exists, whereas it doesn't on the SR6011. And that's about it. Well, there is the little hiccup about the HDMI thing, because the SR7010, like I say, technically it does 4K and HDR and Dolby Vision. Those all go through, but as I said earlier, it has the issue where if it's a 12-bit signal, it just doesn't make it through the SR7010. I don't totally know if it'll make it through your SR6011. I don't have first-hand experience with that one. But as far as I'm aware, now I'm forgetting. It might have been until the 6012 before you got the little settings option to switch between standard and enhanced mode on the HDMI. Yeah, some little thing is going off in my head that didn't come around until the 12 years. So, yeah. But I can tell you for sure the 7010 does not have that option. It doesn't let you switch between standard and enhanced mode, which really only matters if you have a 3D device, because 3D devices are about the only ones that require you to set it to standard instead of enhanced. Otherwise, you can just leave it in enhanced all the time. So, yeah, that's about it.
All right. Let's do at least one more
At
here.
least.
I don't know how
We
long
got
JR's
time.
questions is. JR. I'm scrolling through some pictures. Things look like a room.
Yes, reminders of his room.
JR made some adjustments so that he could wall mount his surrounds. So I guess his surrounds are now wall mounted. They look like those trapezoidal type thingies.
Yeah, we had the previous images when he had added his surround backs on stands that we had talked about, those video secu side clamping stands. And then he's got even more updated images now that he has wall mounted his B and W trapezoidal shaped surround speakers.
Okay. He basically wall mounted them where they already were.
That's right. Took them off the stands, put them on the walls.
All right, he tends to get a pair of SVS PC 2000 Pro cylinder subs. If he were to put them directly below his now wall-mounted surrounds, they'd both be slightly behind the midway point of his side walls. Would that be a big problem? I mean, it's not a big problem.
Nope. You do, I believe, have the option of, so because of the bookcases, it would pretty much have to go directly below your surround right speaker. So that'll be slightly...
Right, that's a done deal there.
That'll be slightly behind the midpoint of the right side wall. But then you could go
the other one
forward on the left side to basically where the sub that you already have currently resides. You could put the cylinder there, and now they would be ever so slightly diagonally across the room from each other, but one slightly behind the midpoint of the room and slightly in front of the midpoint on the room on the left side. That's the way to do it.
All right. I agree with that 100%. JR wrote to Gick to get their suggestions for the best. When you called to them, did they say anything about my panels? Because I haven't heard from them.
He wrote to them.
Well, next time you do, ask them about my panels. Anyways, get their suggestions for the best way to acoustically treat his room. He sent them photos in the description and mentioned that his top priority is to get the most accurate frequency response and the best home theater experience possible. Now, for those of you who aren't on YouTube, he's got black acoustic foam in semi, not entirely random places, but lots of little
behind
weird
the speakers,
places
side walls, some sort of triangle-y ones in some of the corners.
Yeah, I can't really figure out what's going on that soffit, though. Is that some tube up there? I'm not really sure. Anyways, Gick replied that his current foam treatments are doing slightly more than nothing. I think that was generous of them. But they would replace all of them rather than adding to them. For a setup, they would prioritize base trapping, then first reflections in the back wall and front walls. But because of restrictions of this room, bookcase on the right, French doors on the left, back taken up with the office desk and the treadmill, they might put more treatments on the available surfaces, front wall and ceiling, than if there were no restrictions. The full package they suggested would cost over $3,000 after shipping. That would include floor-to-ceiling tri-traps in his 3 available corners, thicker than usual treatments on his front wall, since he really can't treat the back wall too much. 4-inch thick panels in the taller parts of his ceiling, and 2-inch thick panels on the lower parts behind the seats, and freestanding panels for the sides to go in front of the bookcase and French doors. When JR asked what they do for about half the price, they reduced the number of tri-traps and reduced the number of 6-inch panels on the front wall and 4-inch panels on the ceiling, but kept the overall same approach, just kept the 4 freestanding panels for the side wall. So, overall, do we agree with Gick's suggestions? Anything we think they got wrong? And that's where that question ends. Let me scroll back up here. So freestanding panels for the side walls. Is that what that what he said?
Because you can't mount them on his bookcase. So
yeah, I do like that suggestion. Okay, first of all, I do agree that the foam is best
pull it down,
sold. Yeah, pull it down, sell it to somebody else. Great for just advertise it as great for Twitch streamers.
Sure.
For to make their Twitch stream room sound better, and that should sell it in a hot minute because people are bored out of their minds right now. I like the freestanding panels. All the stuff on the ceiling is fine, though I personally have a hard time recommending that to people for a lot of reasons, one of which I have lived in rooms with panels on the ceilings, and they work. It's not that they don't work. It's just that to me, it makes the room feel a little bit more oppressive. Just like there's something hanging down up there. Yeah. And it just feels, to me, I don't like the way it feels. So that's my personal.
I think they're right acoustically to at least have them at the first reflection points on your ceilings.
Yes.
I am in full agreement with that. I mean, their reduced plan that they talked about, I would
sounds a lot more reasonable.
Yeah, I would probably go with that for the ceiling. Whatever if you were able to afford more corner-based trapping, I think that's a good idea. I mean, overall, what they described, I'm in agreement with. That if you're experiencing any unevenness in your frequency response, you want to have that as thick as you can, corner base trapping as much as you can. That since you can't really treat your back wall and it is a good distance behind you, that you compensate for that by more heavily treating your front wall. That you do take care of your side wall reflections and your ceiling first reflections. Like, I'm in agreement with all of that. So.
He's got extra corners around here too, so that he could. That's what's also making this more expensive. What I might consider, and I don't know if they suggested this or not, is rather than kill yourself trying to put panels all over your ceiling and stuff like that, is actual tri-traps going across the soffit there, right. So that it's mounted to the soffit. So, and I don't know if they actually fit. You'll have to do the measurement when I'm hanging over.
Well, that's sort of getting into the next question coming up. That
okay.
Could definitely be applicable there.
Let me scroll down. Okay, I'm scrolling.
Yeah, see.
Could he DIY a bunch of this so that he can get closer to the full package that Gick originally recommended, but at closer to half the price? If so, what sort of materials is he going to need, and which products should he still buy ready-made from Gick? He does have interest in having images printed on some of the panels. Well, the images printed on the panels you should do.
Yes.
They aren't cheap. They're not cheap, but they are. I'm hoping they're going to be worth it. I will report to you when I get mine. But by all the things we've heard, they've gotten good reviews. But having them pre-made from them, I mean, we have a guide on our website that tells you kind of how to do it, and all you have to remember is that the movie poster part of it you can't do.
Yeah.
It is, if you have Photoshop skills, it will be infinitely easier for you. I was trying to do it myself, follow that guide and do it myself with the images that I had, and I was having no luck because I'm just not good enough with Photoshop. I don't have Photoshop. I use the free Photoshop program
Right.
that you can get online. And I was having no luck kind of trying to wrap my brain around how to do that. So if you're a Photoshop guy, you can do that part yourself, and then you can buy panels and then just wrap them yourself. I would consider, I don't know how handy you are, but all the corner trapping you can do yourself.
That's
and
right.
You can buy the material straight from GIK.
You could.
And then...
Because, I mean, all you're going to get is Roxel. You're going to get 2 foot by 4 foot Roxel. You're going to first cut them in half to make 2 foot by 2 foot squares, and then you're going to cut those in diagonals to make triangles, and you're just going to stack triangles in the available corners, and that cuts down on the price considerably over buying pre-made tri-traps. I would definitely consider DIYing your corners.
I would suggest as well that I don't think the tri-traps have as much material in them as what you would do if you did this kind of corner
Tom
trap.
suggested that horizontal corner created by the soffit overhead to your ceiling, you could essentially tri-trap right along there as super chunk right along there with your own insulation. So that all of that I could probably suggest doing DIY, and that'll cut down on the price quite a bit just doing that.
And if you're just going to do like black panels or whatever, or just monocolored panels, I'm telling you, they're not that hard to make, and you could screw up a couple of them and not still spend all that much money.
And I would suggest just looking at GIK's DIY kits, their DIY frames and that. And I mean, not one, you could buy it that way because that's less expensive than getting the pre-made panel, or just copy the design because it's not that complicated a design. That's what Andrew did and showed last week, where he just sort of copied that idea of the DIY frames, made his own panels. The freestanding panels, the printed panels, and they had some suggestions in the original, the full $3,000 package for at least a couple of the panels to have scatter plates or impression series diffusion on front. Those I would buy from GIK. Anything that's got the scatter plate on it, I would go ahead and buy that from GIK. The freestanding, the printed, I would strongly consider buying those from GIK. Pretty much all the corner base trapping, I'd DIY that because that can save you a pile of money and it'll be very beneficial. And it's pretty easy. You're just cutting insulation, Roxel.
Right. The hardest part is just covering it. It's just building a little frame to cover it. And that's on you as to how handy you are.
I think we're going to do one more. Should be able
one
to
more.
one.
Bob found an interesting write-up about roll-to-roll printed loudspeaker paper developed. I read this too. Developed at Chemnitz University of Technology in Germany. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. They've been working on printable loudspeaker paper since 2015, and the newest advancements allow roll-to-roll manufacturing, which greatly reduces manufacturing time and cost. Piezoelectronics are embedded in the paper, which can have images or text printed on both sides. Then the paper is coated on both sides with an organic polymer that acts as electrodes. Since it comes out just like a roll of paper, it can line entire walls, be used as posters that also produce sound, or be shaped into just about anything, including books. Is this basically the same concept as how electrostatic speakers work? No,
but it's pretty close to planar magnetic.
Yeah. So electromagnetic speakers, the way they work is they have two basic I would call them grates, like your
stators, they're called.
State. I know that, but like your screen door. Imagine like that, but metal and really super thin. They had two of those, and then in between they put this very, very, very light filament that is a very thin metal
usually
filament.
Mylar.
And then they change the polarity of the two screen door materials to make the thing go back and forth.
Yeah, there's literally a really high static charge that's built up in those screen doors on either side, and then they rapidly flip the polarity on them, and that makes the tiny little film of metal in between vibrate back and forth, and that's your speakers.
And the thing's essentially weightless. Right. I mean, it weighs almost nothing. So
that's electrostatic.
In essence, that's electrostatic. That is not.
But this, so in planar magnetic, they'll take a little piece, again, very often Mylar. Sometimes it's actually like nylon or something like that. But that they will sometimes like draw or trace a metal almost like grid pattern or kind of like a back and forth snake pattern on that. And then there are magnets, permanent magnets on either side. And so when the charge goes through that metal grid that's been printed onto that very thin film in between the permanent magnets, then you switch the polarity on the electrical current going through the film that's laminated to that little piece, and that's what makes it act against the magnets and go back and forth. So since this is like laminating electrodes on either side of a piece of paper that has a piezoelectric inside of it, and that piezoelectric is the thing that's flipping its polarity, it's a little, it's not really like planar magnetic. It's planar magnetic in that it's got this laminated layer to it. So that's not the way electrostatics work. But there's no they didn't describe any permanent magnets going on. It's, so it's its own thing, but it's got some elements of other planar technologies.
So he asked, where could we foresee this being applied in home theaters? Printed artwork speakers in addition to printed acoustic panels, maybe? I see this being applied like in displays that make sound. Basically, very, very thin displays that make sound is how I kind of see this happening.
I mean, this will be on posters for sure.
But I see this more as marketing.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, like in a marketing situation. I don't see this in a home theater application. I just don't think the fidelity is going to be good enough, at least until they...
You know what I was thinking? That if it works, if it's good enough... Could this be used for active noise cancellation on a room scale?
You literally stole that out of my brain. Okay. I was like, you know what? This would be great at like restaurants. Right? Just like wallpaper a restaurant in this crap, and then you just active noise cancel the whole thing. I absolutely thought that exact same thing. I think in stores and stuff like that, this is where I think that's the application I would be pushing this towards. Like active noise canceling. You know, it just cuts down all the reflections and stuff that are going around. I think that's brilliant.
I kind of doubt that this is like replacing your home theater speakers as your main speakers. I just don't think the
fidelity is going to be there. You know, I just don't think it is. Especially like getting bass out of these things is not going to be easy.
Well, yeah, and I mean, when they're basing it on piezoelectrics, I mean that's really, really, really tiny voltages. And so I don't think the idea is like really loud output. I mean, you get output by virtue of having a super large surface area that barely has to move to displace air. But that, typically that's not how you're going to get to a high fidelity speaker. But if this is, I like the idea of it being used for active noise cancellation, honestly. I don't know if it can be done, but it kind of makes sense because it obviously can be visually hidden quite easily.
Sure. I like it. Yeah. All right, so who do we have left?
We have Michael K., Mike H. I didn't even notice it was a Mike and a Mike. Steve S. James S. No relation. And Christian. There we go. That is everybody on the list. Plus anything that came in on Monday or Tuesday because I cut things off on Sunday night. That's what goes on the list in case anybody's like, hey, I sent something in on Monday. How come I wasn't mentioned? Sunday night's the cutoff.
Yeah, that's why. Right. All right. Oh, I got to do our listeners of the week. Okay. Let's thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Lee for going to avrant.com and leaving us clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and leaving us a PayPal donation, as well as our 123 patrons over at patreon.com, including Nathan.
For sure, Lee. Thank you so much for that PayPal donation. Really do appreciate that. And patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anybody who might like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Thanks so much to our 123 patrons. And Nathan, thank you for being one of them.
I want to thank Joe for sending me pictures to use on AV Gadgets, and the notes of gratitude from Nathan, Manuel, Nick, and Cory. So thank you.
That's right, Joe. Thanks for giving Tom that permission to use pictures on avgadgets.com. Tom is the editor-in-chief over there. He's the big man on campus.
Woohoo!
Look at who you're talking to, folks.
I am steering the ship.
That's right.
I am also doing all the other things on the ship.
It is Tom's
I am the ship. I am the ship.
And Nathan, Manny, Nick, and Cory, thank you all very much for the notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going and for the notes of encouragement. It is appreciated, and we want to thank everybody who continues to listen, continues to send in questions, because we don't have much of a show without all of that, and it's wonderful to keep this community going.
All right. If you want your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
want your question answered, send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.